The night my family kicked me out of their house, my mother told me something I would never forget. She stood at the front door with her arms crossed and said, "You are no longer welcome here." My father didn't stop her. My older brother watched from the hallway. My younger sister stood behind him, silently staring at me. I had one suitcase in my hand, $47 in my bank account, and nowhere to go. I was 22 years old. I had just lost my job, and instead of helping me through the worst month of my life, my family decided I was a burden they didn't want anymore. My father told me I was wasting my life. My mother said I had embarrassed the family enough. My brother laughed and said I would come crawling back within a week. I didn't. I disappeared from their lives that night. For 10 years, I built a life they knew nothing about. I worked jobs nobody wanted, slept in apartments I could barely afford, started a business from a borrowed laptop, and slowly became someone I was proud of. Then, exactly 10 years after my family threw me out, someone knocked on my front door. When I opened it, I saw my parents, my brother, and my sister standing together. They looked exhausted. They looked desperate. And my father said the words I never expected to hear from him. "Please, we need your help." My name is Ethan Carter, and for most of my childhood, I thought my family was everything. We lived in a quiet neighborhood outside Dallas, Texas. My father owned a small construction company. My mother worked at a local school. My older brother, Jason, was the favorite. He was 4 years older than me, athletic, confident, and incredibly good at convincing people he knew what he was doing. My younger sister, Megan, was the baby of the family. She could get away with almost anything. Then there was me. I was the middle child. Quiet, not particularly athletic, not interested in sports. I liked computers. I liked business. I liked taking things apart to see how they worked. My father never understood me. He wanted me to work with him. He wanted me to become a contractor. He wanted me to take over his company someday. But I didn't want that. I wanted to build something of my own. When I was 17, I started learning computer programming. I watched free videos online. I practiced late at night. I built simple websites for local businesses. I earned my first $300 creating a website for a neighborhood restaurant. I was incredibly proud. I told my father. He laughed. "That's not a real career." I said, "It could be." He shook his head. "People don't make real money sitting behind a computer." Jason laughed from the kitchen. "Maybe Ethan can build you a website for your construction company." Everyone laughed. I smiled. But inside, I felt embarrassed. Still, I kept learning. After high school, I enrolled in a local community college. I worked part-time at an electronics store. I paid for my own classes. My father complained that I wasn't helping enough around the house. Jason had already moved out. Megan was still in school. So somehow, everything became my responsibility. I didn't complain. I wanted independence. Then, during my second year of college, everything fell apart. The electronics store closed. I lost my job. I had barely enough money for rent and tuition. I applied everywhere. Nothing worked. I asked my father if I could temporarily reduce my contribution to the household. He became furious. "You're an adult." "I know." "Then act like one." I lost my job. "That's not my problem." I stared at him. "I'm asking for a little time." He shook his head. "You've been asking for time your entire life." That wasn't true. But arguing with him never helped. A few weeks later, I fell behind on my car payment. My car was repossessed. I was humiliated. I felt like I was failing at everything. I started sleeping badly. I stopped going to some classes. My grades dropped. One evening, I came home and found my father sitting at the kitchen table. My mother was beside him. Jason was there too. I immediately knew something was wrong. My father said, "Sit down." I sat. He looked at me. We've been talking. About what? About you. My stomach tightened. My mother said, Ethan, this isn't working. What isn't? Living here. I stared at her. What are you talking about? My father said, you're 22. I know. You don't have a job. I've been applying. Your grades are terrible. I know. You don't contribute enough. I've been trying. He slammed his hand on the table. Trying isn't enough. I went silent. Jason leaned back in his chair. He smiled. My father continued. You need to learn what life is really like. I asked, so what are you saying? My mother looked away. My father said, you need to leave. I thought I had misunderstood him. Leave where? This house. I laughed nervously. You're kicking me out. My father said, yes. I looked at my mother. She wouldn't look at me. Mom. She whispered, maybe this is what you need. I felt something break inside me. I looked at Jason. He shrugged. I said, you agree with this? He laughed. Dude, you're 22. Grow up. I looked at my father. Where am I supposed to go? He said, that's your problem. I couldn't believe it. I stood up. My mother said, we'll give you until tonight. Tonight. You heard him. I went upstairs. I packed one suitcase. Clothes. My laptop. A few books. My college papers. I looked around the bedroom where I had grown up. There were photographs on the wall. Family vacations. Birthdays. Christmas mornings. Everyone smiling. I stared at one picture for a long time. Then I took it off the wall. I don't know why. Maybe because I wasn't ready to accept that everything had changed. I walked downstairs. My father was waiting. I put the suitcase near the door. I said, I hope you're sure. He didn't answer. My mother said, Ethan, please don't make this harder. I looked at her. You're the one making it hard. She started crying. But she didn't stop me. I opened the door. Before I walked outside, Jason said something. Give it a week. I turned. He laughed. You'll come crawling back. I looked at him. I said, I won't. He smiled. Sure. Then I walked away. That was the last time I lived in my family's house. I spent that first night in my car. It was February. The temperature dropped below freezing. I sat in the driver's seat with my suitcase beside me. I didn't know where I would sleep the next day. I didn't know how I would pay tuition. I didn't know whether I could keep going to college. I didn't know anything. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going back. The next morning, I called a friend from college. His name was Marcus. I hadn't spoken to him in months. I told him what happened. He didn't ask questions. He simply said, come over. Marcus lived with 2 roommates. They let me sleep on their couch. I stayed there for 6 weeks. During that time, I worked whatever jobs I could find. Warehouse shifts. Delivery driving. Restaurant work. Computer repair. Anything. I took classes at night. I studied in coffee shops. I slept 4 or 5 hours a night. And I started building websites again. One local business hired me. Then another. Then another. I realized something. My father had been wrong. People would pay for what I could build. I started taking the work seriously. I created a small business. I called it Carter Digital Solutions. I used my middle name because I didn't want anyone to know it was connected to my family. My first year was brutal. I made less than $30,000. But it was mine. Every dollar came from something I had built. I rented a tiny apartment. I bought a used car. I finished college, and I never asked my parents for anything. Not once. I thought about them constantly. I wondered if they missed me. I wondered if they regretted what they had done. Then one day, I received an email from my mother. It said, "Hope you're doing okay." That's it. No apology. No explanation. I stared at the email for 10 minutes. Then I deleted it. A few months later, Jason called. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. "Hey, Ethan, Dad wants you to come by." I deleted it. Then Megan texted. "Mom says you should visit." I replied, "No." She asked why. I didn't respond. I wasn't trying to punish them. I was trying to survive. And slowly my life changed. My company grew. I hired a second employee. Then a third. We started working with restaurants. Then medical offices. Then small banks. Then larger companies. I learned marketing. I learned sales. I learned finance. I learned how to manage employees. I made mistakes. A lot of them. But every mistake taught me something. 5 years after my family kicked me out, I bought my first house. It wasn't enormous, but it was beautiful. I stood in the empty living room holding the keys. I remembered my father's words. "You're wasting your life." I smiled. I wasn't. 7 years after I left, I bought the company building. Then I bought another property. Then I started investing in small businesses. By the 8th year, Carter Digital Solutions had become a regional technology company. We had 40 employees. I still worked constantly. But now, I had something my younger self had never had. Security. I had money saved. I had investments. I had a team. I had a future. And I had peace. Then, on the 10th anniversary of the night I was kicked out, something strange happened. I was sitting in my office when my assistant knocked. She said, "Ethan, there are some people here to see you." "Who?" She hesitated. "Your parents." My heart stopped. I hadn't seen them in almost 6 years. I asked, "What do they want?" She said, "They won't tell me." I looked at the clock. "Send them in." A few seconds later, the door opened. My father walked in first. He looked older. Much older. His hair was mostly gray. My mother followed. She looked exhausted. Then Jason. Then Megan. For a moment, nobody spoke. My father looked around my office. He saw the company logo. The employees outside. The awards on the wall. The city view through the windows. I could see the realization on his face. This wasn't the broke, 22-year-old he had kicked out. This was my company. My life. My success. My mother started crying. "Ethan." I stood. "Hi, Mom." She walked toward me. I didn't move. She stopped. My father said, "Can we talk?" I nodded. We sat down. Nobody spoke. Finally, my father said, "We need help." There it was. The reason they came. I looked at him. "What happened?" My father looked at Jason. Jason looked down. I already knew. My father said, "The family business is in trouble." I almost laughed. His construction company. The same company he had wanted me to inherit. The company Jason had eventually joined. Apparently, Jason had taken over several years earlier. And he had made a series of bad decisions. Large loans. Expensive equipment. Bad contracts. Unpaid taxes. A failed development project. The company was drowning in debt. My father had used his house as collateral. My mother had drained her retirement account. And now the bank was preparing to seize the remaining assets. I asked, how much? My father told me. I stared at him. It was a huge amount. I looked at Jason. What happened? Jason said, the market changed. I said, that's not an answer. He became defensive. I did what I thought was best. I replied, you almost destroyed Dad's company. My father said, that's why we're here. I leaned back. You're asking me for money. My mother immediately said, no. I looked at her. She cried. We're asking you to help us. I asked, why? My father looked embarrassed. Because you're the only person we know who can. I almost smiled. 10 years earlier, I had stood at their front door with one suitcase. Now they were standing at mine. And suddenly, I remembered Jason's voice. You'll come crawling back. I looked at him. Do you remember what you said the night I left? He didn't answer. I said, you told me I'd come crawling back within a week. His face changed. My mother whispered, Ethan. I said, I'm not trying to hurt anyone. I just want you to understand something. My father looked at me. You didn't believe I could succeed. He lowered his head. You thought kicking me out would teach me a lesson. Silence. It did. My father looked confused. I continued. You taught me that nobody was coming to save me. I paused. And that turned out to be the best lesson anyone ever gave me. My mother cried harder. Then my father said, we were wrong. I stared at him. I had waited 10 years to hear those words. We were wrong, he repeated. I asked, why now? He didn't answer. I knew why. Because they needed me. But I wasn't going to let them walk away with a check. I asked for their financial documents. My father looked surprised. What? If you want my help, I need to see everything. Jason immediately said, that's not necessary. I looked at him. Then I'm not helping. He went silent. They gave me the documents. I spent the next 2 days reviewing them. The situation was worse than they had admitted. But there was something else. Jason had made one enormous mistake. He had purchased several properties using the company as collateral. Most were losing money. But one property was different. A large commercial site outside Dallas. It had been purchased cheaply years earlier. The area was now undergoing massive redevelopment. The property was worth far more than the company had paid. I asked my father why they hadn't sold it. He said, Jason believes it will become worth even more. I looked at Jason. Do you have a buyer? No. An offer? No. Then you're gambling. He became angry. You don't know construction. I smiled. You're right. Then I pointed at the financial statements. But I know debt. Jason stopped talking. I created a plan. Sell the underperforming properties. Renegotiate the debt. Liquidate unnecessary equipment. Cut expenses. Settle the tax obligations. And sell the commercial property to my investment company. My father asked, you're buying it? Yes. How much? I gave him the number. Jason immediately objected. That's too low. I looked at him. It's more than the current market value. Not in 5 years. I said, then wait 5 years. He looked at my father. My father said nothing. Eventually, they agreed. The transaction saved the company from bankruptcy. But I didn't stop there. I gave my father one condition. Jason could no longer control the finances. My father looked at him. Jason exploded. You're choosing him. I looked at Jason. The irony was almost painful. 10 years earlier, they had chosen him over me. Now they were being forced to choose responsibility over him. My father said, you've had enough chances. Jason walked out. My mother stayed. She looked at me. Do you hate us? I shook my head. No. Then why didn't you come back? I looked at her. Because you never asked me to. She started crying. I said, you kicked me out, Mom. I know. You watched me leave. I know. You knew I had nowhere to go. She covered her face. I know. I said, I needed you then. She looked at me. And now you need me. She whispered, yes. That was the hardest moment. Because I could have said no. I could have walked away. I could have watched them lose everything. Part of me wanted to. But another part of me remembered being 22. Cold. Scared. Alone. I remembered my mother crying at the front door. I remembered my father refusing to look at me. And I realized something. I didn't want revenge. I wanted closure. So I helped. But I didn't give them money. I gave them a chance to rebuild. My father eventually retired from the construction business. My mother sold the house and moved into a smaller place. Megan got a job and became financially independent. Jason struggled. For the first time in his life, he had to face consequences without my parents protecting him. And I didn't save him. That was his responsibility. My relationship with my parents changed slowly. My father started calling me. At first, the conversations were awkward. Then they became normal. We talked about business, sports, weather, old memories. Eventually, he apologized. Not once. Many times. My mother did too. One evening, my father asked me something. Do you regret leaving? I thought about it. No. He looked surprised. Not even a little. I shook my head. Leaving wasn't my choice. He looked down. But everything I did afterward was. That sentence stayed with him. Years later, my father came to my house for Thanksgiving. My house was much bigger than the home where I grew up. My wife had decorated the dining room. My children were running around. My mother was laughing in the kitchen. My father stood near the window. He looked around. Then he said, you really did it. I smiled. Did what? He said, built the life you wanted. I looked at my family. Then I looked at him. Yes. He said, I'm proud of you. That sentence should have meant more. When I was younger, I would have done anything to hear it. But by then, I didn't need it anymore. I said, thank you. Then he hugged me. And for the first time, the hug didn't feel like something I had earned. It just felt like a father hugging his son. The family home, where I had been kicked out, was eventually sold. I didn't buy it. Some people asked me why. They thought it would be satisfying. They thought I should purchase the house and remind my parents that they had once thrown me out. But I didn't want it. That house represented a version of me that no longer existed. The scared 22-year-old. The son who begged his parents to let him stay. The young man who believed being rejected by his family meant he wasn't worth anything. I didn't need that house. I had built my own. A better one. Not because it was bigger. Because nobody could take it away from me by telling me I didn't belong. 10 years after my family kicked me out, they came begging at my door. They came because they needed money. They came because their business was collapsing. They came because the son they had once called a failure had become the only person capable of helping them. But when I opened that door, I didn't see an opportunity for revenge. I saw 4 people who had made terrible decisions. And I saw the person I used to be. I could have slammed the door. Maybe part of me wanted to. But I didn't. I helped them. Not because I forgot what happened. Because I remembered. I remembered exactly what it felt like to have nowhere to go. And I promised myself that my success would never turn me into the kind of person who enjoyed watching someone else suffer. But helping them didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean pretending the past never happened. It didn't mean giving Jason another chance to destroy everything. It meant setting boundaries. It meant making them responsible for their choices. And it meant finally understanding that forgiveness doesn't require you to become vulnerable to the same person twice. My family thought kicking me out would break me. Instead, it forced me to build myself. They thought I would come crawling back. I never did. 10 years later, they came crawling to me. And when they stood at my door asking for help, I realized something that changed the way I saw my entire past. Sometimes the people who reject you aren't ending your story. They're accidentally pushing you toward the life you were meant to build. The night I left my family's house, I thought I had lost everything. I was wrong. I hadn't lost my family. I had lost the version of them I believed existed. And in losing that illusion, I found myself. I built a career. I built a company. I built financial security. I built friendships. I built a family of my own. Most importantly, I built a life where my worth wasn't determined by whether my parents chose me. And when they finally came begging at my door, I didn't need to prove anything. I didn't need to say, "Look at me now." I didn't need to remind them that Jason had been wrong. I didn't need to make them feel small, because the truth was already standing in front of them. I had survived. I had succeeded. And I had become someone my 22-year-old self would have been proud of. My family kicked me out of their home with one suitcase and $47. 10 years later, they stood at my front door asking for help. And I opened it, not because they deserved a second chance, because I had already earned mine.